This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority 480 herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 herbicide provides extended activity on the toughest weeds like kochia, wild buckwheat, cleavers, Russian thistle, and many more. See your local retailer today for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Sean Haney, your host here on this Wednesday, midweek edition of the show. And we're down in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're enjoying the National Farm Machinery Show. And like we have been doing the past number of years, we're here with Syngenta Canada today. They are today's show's sponsor. It has been great to be down here again, really taking in the festivities and the farm show and being able to really interact with all the Syngenta customers that are down here from Ontario. There is a lot of them indeed. Today's show, like I said, brought to you by Syngenta. You can find out more by going to syngenta.ca/products. Now, I want you to check out the full suite of portfolio when it comes to Miravis. So whether you're growing wheat, corn, soybeans, horticultural crops, Miravis is really a fungicide solution that you need to be considering. Speaking of fungicide, we're going to be talking about that a little bit here today on the program. So here's the lineup that we have, okay? Now, on the fungicide front, we've got Marika Vanderlaan and Phil Krieg of Syngenta. We're going to be on the show floor talking about fungicide as it relates to corn production in the U.S. and in Canada. We're also going to hear today from Reg Gurney, farmer from Ontario, as well as Brian Woolley. He's been with Syngenta a long time as well. We're going to talk about wheat production and how, with a little bit of intent and intensity, we've really changed the way that we have produced the wheat crop and what we're striving for from a yield standpoint. And Reg, in particular, he's got a number of crops under his belt. So he's going to share some of his wisdom with us here today. We're going to hear from Kim McConnell, former CEO of AdFarm. Kim is really an ambassador for Canadian agriculture. He did a fireside chat on Monday night with former U.S. Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Affairs, Ted McKinney. Ted is also right now the CEO of NASDA in the U.S. So they talked a lot about Canada-U.S. trade relations and the economic partnership and a little bit about also where we go forward from here as both countries are about to have an election. What could the relationship look like post-election in both countries? And we're also going to hear from the Shadow Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. It is John Barlow. He's the Shadow Minister for Ag for the Conservative Party of Canada. Lindsay Smith had a chance to catch up with him on Monday night at the Northern Ontario Ag Conference. There's a lot happening this week. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Kim McConnell right after this. Today's show is brought to you by Syngenta Canada. We're joined right now by Philip Korzak. He is the Director of Sales for Western Canada for Vaderstad, based out of Saskatchewan. If somebody's never had a seed hawk in the field before, why would you look at purchasing one?
Really, one of the keys that has been to our success that's lasted so long is our dual knife seed and fertilizer system. We do believe that we are the most accurate seeding tool in the market for seed placement. And the key component, not only with that seed placement, is also the fertilizer location. But we really feel that the dual knife system with the separation horizontally and vertically is really what's going to ultimately give that crop, especially a small seeded crop and high value crop like canola, easy access to those nutrients very early on and quick emergence. But equally important with that quick emergence is the even emergence.
If somebody wants more information on Vaderstad, how do they find it, Philip?
You know what? You can go to our website. It's very simple. It's just www.vaderstad.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio, brought to you today by Syngenta Canada. I want to talk to you about the Miravis brands. Whether you're growing wheat, corn, soybeans, horticultural crops, make sure you check out Miravis. Okay, you can find out more by going to syngenta.ca/products. That is Miravis. Okay, now we're going to have a discussion with Kim McConnell. He is former CEO of AdFarm. He was on location at Canada's Ag Day on Tuesday. He hosted a panel as well as a pre-event on Monday night. Kim, how are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Okay, so you were you hosted a panel on the Tuesday, but let's start off with Monday night. You did a private function, or I guess a pre-function, where you were able to do a bit of a fireside chat with Ted McKinney. He is CEO of NASDA. He was also involved in the Trump administration. What was the purpose of this get-together?
Well, the purpose of it was hosted by a group called Kane from Alberta, and nobody knows too much about Kane. And like many things around Canada's Agriculture Day, it's a hub of activity and lots of different things come in. So Kane hosted an event with an interesting speaker, being Mr. McKinney. And it was a way to kick things off and elevate the Kane presence and be able to profile from there. You see that kind of activity around Canada's Ag Day and many of the big farm shows all over. That's one of the great things about agriculture, is that you host an event, but you get all the side events that come with it. So that was what was the real purpose of it.
Yeah. So what were some of the insights that Mr. McKinney had? You know, he's right now, he is, as president or CEO of NASDA, he is looking at agriculture really, really across the United States. Obviously, agriculture from a scale perspective, larger in the U.S., but we share a lot of the same objectives between the two countries. So what were some of the things that he said that were
So in his current job, he is the CEO of NASDA, as you said, which is an association that involves the state secretaries of agriculture. So it's all the states that come together.
Yep.
And he spoke about the importance of that and how agriculture in many ways is state-led, not necessarily federal-led, and how the working together of the states can be so powerful, not just in the U.S., but beyond the U.S. I asked him about, well, gee, you got Republicans and you got Democrats, and, I'm sure they're fighting. And he said, agriculture is a unique industry. On agriculture, both the Democrats and the Republicans can often agree on things. And he said, so we can make a lot more progress than a lot of other things did. He also reached out, Sean, and said, I think Canada would benefit very, very much from an organization similar to this, where the provincial ministers of agriculture meet more often and be able to advance things that are right for the agricultural industry in Canada, as well as their different provinces. And I think there was a fair appetite by the audience to hear that type of a message. So that was interesting in itself.
Yeah.
Of course, we also asked, or I had the opportunity to ask him some questions. He was involved with, he was an undersecretary of agriculture in the Trump administration. So I got to give, and he had responsibility for trade and foreign affairs. So he gave us a perspective of how he saw the world and the world of agriculture. He gave a little insight of what it was like to work within the White House, and the White House with the Trump as president. He had some stories in that regard that were that were really quite enjoyable. He would also have said a few things that were messages that his perspective of messages for Canada. One of the ones that he repeated a few times was the dairy industry and the U.S. dairy industry and the Canadian dairy industry. We're not on the same plan here. And we got some challenges, big challenges there. He repeated that on a number of occasions. So I think that's a message that came through pretty loud and clear. Mm. He also talked about all the opportunities in technology and the whole works. He talked strongly about the relationship, the good relationship between Canada and the U.S., and how we needed to continue to do more things together. He spoke positively about the USMCA, or we would have called it the new NAFTA. I think we should be calling it the USMCA, however, because as we get closer to having to redo this agreement, and as the possibility of President Trump being back in the White House, this is one of the areas that Mr. McKinney believes that Mr. Trump was quite proud of being able to have an agreement with the North American partners. And it may not be all perfect in a lot of areas, but it's one that Mr. Trump is proud of. And as we're looking at ways to strengthen our relationship between Canada and the U.S., then that's probably one that we should probably talk a little more about.
Yeah, Kim, I've been saying I am concerned about what this, the relook or the renegotiation or however you want to phrase that, what that looks like in 2026. And obviously we don't know who the political players are. We're going to have an American election, of course, in the fall of 24. We're going to have had a Canadian election by fall of 25. One of the things that I have my perception is that we're not necessarily seizing the full opportunity of the collaboration between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico when it comes to really operating more, focusing more as like an economic zone. I'm not talking about like similar currencies and things like that. Like I'm not saying we recreate the EU, but being much more like, hey, we're adjacent to each other. We have a trade pact. How do we really leverage this?
Yes,
do you agree with that?
I would totally agree with you, Sean, on that. I would think my takeaway from our discussion with Mr. McKinney would be that agriculture is one example of where we do things very, very well together. If he specifically brought out the beef industry and how we are basically a North American, we are joined at the hip in that area. We need more of those types of things. And his point would be agriculture can play a key role in helping bring that together. I'm not convinced at times, however, that our negotiators are recognizing that the value of agriculture can play in some of these types of things in bringing countries together, in advancing Canada is often is recognized to the level it could be.
Yeah, it brings forward the question if you look at the status or where the Secretary of Agriculture sits at the cabinet table versus potentially where our federal ag minister on both sides of the aisle, I might add, where they sit in cabinet and the influence that they have or don't have, there is a difference there.
There certainly is. That was a question I brought forward to him, is that it appeared to me that Sonny Perdue and President Trump were fairly close. It appears to me that Secretary Vilsack and President Biden are fairly close. What lessons could we do to elevate agriculture in Canada so that we were at the big boys table, as I called it, rather than the kiddies table, which I think we are often relegated to? He was somewhat surprised at that comment that was made there because of the importance that agriculture is and how it can play such an important role both domestically and internationally and on different areas. When we have a food security issue, why aren't we using agriculture as our export opportunities to the level that we could be? Those were some comments that he was somewhat surprised that maybe we aren't getting the respect as an industry that we believe often, I think, in agriculture we should have, and he thought we would have had, being such a great, big, and important international exporter.
To wrap up here, did he feel optimistic about the renegotiation when he talked about it? Is it something to be concerned about?
We didn't speak specifically about the renegotiation. He was very optimistic about our good friendly relationship partner. Yes, we have, and we always will have a few rub points, but by golly, the benefits and the strength of both partners beside each other, we got to keep going on that, and there's and everybody wants that in his mind on both sides. Let's make it happen. Let's mitigate the sore points, and let's move on and get to the real, and let's keep going on the real positive points. He was very, very positive in that. He left a very good message. He left a very good message with the entire crowd that sort of reverberated all into the evening, and then really helped kick off the next day, which was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Canada's Ag Day, full credit to Farm Credit Canada. They hosted an exceptional day with huge crowd, lots of excitement, it was wonderful.
Okay, so to finish up there, what's your biggest takeaway from the Tuesday event?
Oh, the excitement and the opportunity that we have in agriculture from a technology perspective, from a sustainability perspective. There was many discussions, topics on with big leaders. The panel that Lena Cook moderated with John Stackhouse and
Ken Seitz was there.
Ken Seitz and Michael McCain on sustainability, and yes, how we can utilize this as an opportunity to be more profitable in agriculture, some areas in that, but also to be able to advance and contribute, not just on a stronger agricultural industry, but also on a stronger planet perspective. Lots of discussion there. Very good panel on leadership with McDonald's and McCain's, the leaders of them, and Kendra Donnelly from the producer group did a fantastic job on the importance of leadership, the importance of collaborating and working together. It was wonderful. Mm-hmm. Murad Al-Khatib did a presentation, and he was typical Murad. He was high energy. He bunked us on the nose on a few things and said this isn't good enough and we can do better, and he went on some other areas of where the opportunities are and where it was. So everybody walked out of that event, the 750 people, and including a whole bunch of students from various universities that were in there, and saying, by golly, it's good to be in agriculture. And that was the celebration I think that our industry wants to have and needs to have every once in a while, especially as we're going into times where sometimes it's a little too wet, and some definitely other areas is a little too dry, and all these other things, and commodity prices. But look, at the long-term future is pretty darn positive.
Hey, awesome stuff. Kim, really appreciate you joining us.
All the best. Thank you, Sean. Have a good one.
That was Kim McConnell providing his perspectives on the event on Monday and Tuesday with Canada's Ag Day. Some really important tidbits. There's things to reflect on, especially when we look at the relationship, the economic relationship in agriculture between Canada and the U.S. Really, and does anybody have more passion about agriculture than Kim McConnell? I really don't think so. Okay, when we come back on Real Ag Radio, we're going to talk to Reg Gurney, farmer from Woodstock, and we're also going to hear from Brian Woolley. He's with Syngenta at a Port Dover. We're going to talk about looking back on wheat production, looking in the current wheat production, and look forward a little bit as well. You're listening to Real Ag Radio, brought to you by Miravis Brands and Syngenta Canada.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Joining me on the line is Barry Mann. He's the Vice President of Investor Relations for Genesis Fertilizers, and we're talking about an exciting project.
So the project is essentially bringing farmers together to create a vertically integrated fertilizer company based on the prairies, and it's to give farmers the opportunity to take advantage of the abundant supply that we have of natural gas, create our own nitrogen fertilizer from that, and deliver direct to the farm.
Investing in this project, a farmer that does, they're still going to pay market price for the product, but they're going to see a benefit in the payback after.
Yeah, I think you've pretty well summarized it. With the vertical integration, we're not out to bust the market. It's going to join the market. So yeah, we'll be selling it at market price, but because the farmers are the owners, because they're the shareholders, they just also are going to happen to be the customer. Based on the amount of fertilizer that they use on their farm, the average farmer is taking an ownership stake in the project based on those tons, so that at the end of the day, those profits come back to the farm.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Today's show is brought to you by Syngenta Canada. We're down in Louisville, Kentucky at the National Farm Machinery Show, and really kind of a cool thing right now. We're going to talk about growing wheat. And I know many of you out there are very, very passionate about wheat production, and we got two gentlemen here that are very much so as well. Up first, it is Brian Woolley out of Port Dover in Ontario with Syngenta. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Very well. Thanks for being here this morning. Looking forward to talking about wheat.
Yeah, so now for you, this is a bit of a tradition coming down to the National Farm Machinery Show. For you, what number would this be?
Probably 10 plus. My first one was when I was in university, way back in the 80s. Yeah. This is a fun show. You got the pull, you've got farm show, you got a lot of Ontario growers coming down here to check out some of of course, the equipment and the gear and stuff like that. So this is always one of the highlights, I think, of the first quarter of farm shows. Up as well, spent some time with him last night. We had a really, really cool function with Syngenta Canada, some of the growers that have come down here, and was able to meet him. It is Reg Gurney. He's a farmer out of Woodstock, Ontario. Reg, how's it going?
It's good. Glad to be here.
So for you, how many National Farm Machinery shows?
I think this will be my 6th time here. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Why do you come down? What do you like about it?
I like walking around outside of the building where the guys come up with ideas that you see the big companies have 3 or 4 years later because somebody came up with a thought. Looking at big machinery, you can see that all over the world, but I like that part of it, and the social side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a social side. We've got that part covered very well. Okay, we're going to talk about wheat production. Reg, why do you have wheat in your rotation?
Well, the rotation's got to have something in there to break it up and that kind of stuff. And we always figure that we're going to get probably a 15 bushel bump on the corn crop after a wheat crop. And the wheat crop's an easy one to manage because you can do bump your fertility after the crop comes off. You got time to work with that ground. It's dry in the summertime. You can do whatever it's got to do to bring your get the groceries in the ground where they need to be for the following next 3 years until wheat comes back in again, and it is a money-making crop if you manage it.
Nice, I like that. Not the poverty grass that some want to allege. Absolutely not, Reg. Okay, now I heard during the commercial break that the two of you have been working together, collaborating for quite some time. Brian, you don't need to tell any tales out of school because I'll make sure that Reg gets you back because I'm sure he has some Brian Woolley stories. What are some of the things that you've seen on Reg's farm from a wheat production standpoint that evolved over time?
Well, wheat production in Ontario's, in the last 20 years when Reg and I got working together, Reg is a great plot cooperator, right? And that's why I got to know Reg so well because we would give him a new product or something new to try and he'd get it to yield and we'd learn something good, bad, or indifferent, right? And we continued to do that. But probably 20 years ago, we were talking wheat in the 90s, 90 bushel range, right? And everyone put 90 pounds of nitrogen on, and it really was just a rotation crop. And I think, very soon after, the T3 heading fungicides came out, I think that's when wheat started to advance in what we could get out of the field. And, I think we can all think about wheat peat in our ears, and we started pushing the wheat with more fertility. We had fungicide tools finally that would help protect the wheat crop, and we added a lot of bushels and didn't make it. We made it not into poverty grass. It was actually a production crop that, yes, value in our rotation, but also value in the year of production. That was a profitable crop, and I think Reg says if we manage it properly, Mother Nature has to help us out too. Of course, we can make some money growing wheat, even in a year where maybe the commodity prices are down a bit.
Yeah, and I think, Reg, it comes back a little bit to, and Brian alluded to it, is managing it with intensity, right? So instead of it being a crop you kind of put in because you knew after you're going to get 15% more on the corn, it's a crop that if you manage it with the same intensity that you would that corn crop, it'll produce for you. Now, what are some of the things that you've been doing on your farm from a wheat production standpoint to really push that production higher?
Well, like Brian said, we've worked together on all these fungicides and that kind of stuff, and that definitely helps. And like years ago, you planted the wheat in the fall and you combined it in July, and that was a wheat crop. You put spinner spreader and put urea on in the spring, and then we've switched to 28 because it's a more balanced or leveler field across the field. You don't get the waves out of the 28%, but with the fungicides and that kind of stuff, and we do not spray our wheat with pesticide or herbicide because we always figure if the wheat's thick, it'll kill the weeds, keep the weeds down. So we have cut that out. We don't have to worry about that cold weather injury in the spring on the wheat crop. But managing now, like you're through the wheat fields 4 times usually, if not 5, and you just pay attention to it and that kind of stuff. Like years ago, I'll bet you 9 out of 10 people, maybe even 10 out of 10, wouldn't even know that wheat flowered the way it does. It just nobody looked at it, right? It was just a crop, and it got yellow, and then we combined. So it's just the management side of it now that it's like really the wheat's the same way as any other crop. You got to look after it, and you got to be, with the soil tests and that kind of stuff, and even tissue testing on the crops to see where you are and that. But no, it's interesting. We all want to push for yield and that kind of stuff, and we all got to have a goal, and like Brian said, we made the goal. We had to get over 100 bushel average on all the wheat, and now we got considerable higher than that. And I guess the next goal shooting for is 150 bushel average on all the acres. And if we can ever do that, I'd really be surprised. But
Never say never.
No.
You're right. Like they said the same thing. I remember, we used to talk about 300 bushel corn, and now you look at some of the records. Like we're like mid fives now when it comes to some of the yield challenges. So, and with that comes increased level of attention to detail and the finer things. And I had a grower last night say that we're managing stuff on like quarter acres now, I think is what the comment was, not just on an acre by acre, but we're getting down to the real nitty gritty brass tacks when it comes to some of the management. Now, Brett, I don't want to, you don't need to tell me if you don't want to, but how many wheat crops did you say you've put in now? Because there's some experience here under your belt.
Well, 47 on my own, and 3 years before that with a neighbor. So, I guess 50 years of growing crops and that kind of stuff. Now, in 99, I'll tell you, we sold our dairy cows, and we actually took wheat out of the rotation for 2 years because we said we didn't need the straw and that kind of stuff, and we soon changed and put it back in. Yeah, because the ground needs it,
50 years, that's a lot of listening or having to listen to Wheat Pete. If you like, that's oh boy, that's a lot. I'm sorry, buddy. It's
not a problem.
Okay, Brian, from a fungicide, Reg has brought up fungicide a couple times. Now, is that where are we at? Is using that as a management practice? Is that like it's a given because of the conditions in southwestern Ontario? Like out in Western Canada, it's a little bit more of a sometimes you don't rain very much. Where in Ontario, it's a little bit of a different situation. So, how does that fungicide strategy? What does that look like at this point, based on some of the work that you've been doing in the research?
Well, we had foliar fungicide like Tilt years ago, right? And that was, a lot of guys use that, whether they needed it or not. But, in Ontario, southern Ontario, we have a lot of humidity. We're always at risk of various diseases, and fusarium is a killer if that comes in at harvest or at flowering time. And we haven't done anything to protect against that. You'll lose yield, but more importantly, grain quality and getting downgraded at the elevators. That can be hurtful, right? So, just we've because it's become a production crop and we're putting way more than 90 pounds of N on this crop, you're creating a more robust crop. It's rank. Reg is talking about variable rate seeding of his wheat also, right? And pushing the good spots and having thicker wheat on the knolls too to protect against water loss and whatnot. But you never. And we want fungicides going on before the disease is there. You'll be preventive and pick the right tools. And of course, we're very lucky at Syngenta. Over the last 5 years, we've added to the toolbox for the wheat grower that more than 5 years ago, Syngenta didn't operate in the wheat business, right, in Ontario, anyways. So, but for sure, if you only spray your crop once with a fungicide, it's at heading. We know that 75-85% of the yield comes from the flag leaf. So by spraying at heading time, you have that, keep that green, that flag leaf green as long as possible, and you'll put maximum bushels in the crop, right? So, but you got to protect against fusarium, and while you're doing that, like I said, you protect the flag leaf, and that's how you get yield.
Great stuff. So, Reg, we'll finish up with this. You feeling optimistic about the year ahead, 2024? How are you looking at this growing season?
You got to be optimistic, because if you go into it looking down at the ground and saying, I'm not going to make anything or do anything this year, the big thing is what we're going to get thrown at us for weather. We always worry about that. And when we got a February here in Ontario that there's no snow and it's 8-9 degrees outside where it's not normal, it runs in the back of your mind what the summer's going to be like, whether it's going to be a hot, dry one, or we're not going to get moisture, because if it doesn't rain the right time, we can throw all the groceries at any crop we grow, and if it doesn't rain, we don't reap the rewards from it, But no, looking forward to it.
Yeah, Mother Nature, definitely one of the variables, one of the things that is out of our control. It's how we react to what she does in any sort of growing season. No two growing seasons are alike. It keeps us on our toes for sure. So, hey, Reg, really appreciate you joining us here today on the show. Enjoy the National Farm Machinery Show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And Brian, it's great to see you again, man. We don't get to run each other that often, but it's always down here in Kentucky. So I really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks. It's good to be seen.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a break. What we're going to do next is we're going to be joined by a couple people from Syngenta. We're going to talk about tar spot and the role that fungicides play from a Canadian and U.S. perspective. You're listening to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, brought to you by Syngenta Canada.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky. Brought to you today by Syngenta Canada. Make sure you go to syngenta.ca/products to check out Miravis and the full suite of portfolio of Miravis branded products. Whether you're growing wheat, corn, soybeans, or horticulture crops, there's some fungicides there for you. And speaking of fungicides, we're going to dig into fungicides as it applies to corn production. Joining us right now is, up first, Phil Krieg. He's with Syngenta out of Southern Illinois. Phil, how's it going?
Very well. We're really happy to be here at the National Farm Machinery Show again.
It's hard to believe a year has passed so quickly. We've had you on the show before. It's kind of a bit of an annual thing that we have you on here, so it's great to see you again. Also joining us is Marika Vanderlaan with Syngenta Canada out of Ontario. Hey, Marika, how's it going?
Good. Great to be here as well.
Okay, so Phil, first of all, let's talk about fungicides related to corn production and just overall the role that fungicides play at this point in driving yield higher and managing that crop.
It's really changed a lot about how we produce corn. Fungicides are becoming a major part of the purchase of herbicides and fungicides and crop protection products beginning at the beginning of the year. And people are really following through making those applications. And we've learned so much in the last 6-7 years about how to make these products work best to protect our yield.
Marika, any difference from a Canadian perspective from what Phil just said?
Yeah, I would say very similar in Ontario, that it's becoming more and more common that we're making that decision early versus waiting till July and kind of seeing, is the crop worth putting the fungicide on. I think the decision is happening earlier. Tar spot is a part of that we're all thinking, okay, we got to manage this disease. But in Ontario, too, it would be related to VOM, a lot of growers are thinking about that, and it's just becoming part of the program.
So when we think about some of the decision-making, the reactive versus proactive approach. So when we're trying to be proactive as a grower and we're looking at that corn crop, what are the things that need to go into that decision-making process, Phil, that tells me I need to spray, or, hey, I'm okay not to in this given year?
The thing that we've learned and done the most work around is that plant health benefit that comes from applying our fungicides. Taking a look at how we can keep that plant functioning properly through all of those summer stresses, whether it be drought, whether it be heat, whether it be excessive cool and wet. We've learned that fungicide use really helps protect that yield potential that seed has when we plant. So it's just become, we've learned so much. That's the only thing, I keep going back to that, but we've just learned so much about how fungicides react in those plants.
One of the diseases that it's grabbed a lot of attention on our show and other media entities is tar spot. And you're talking about what we've learned. When we think about tar spot, how do we reflect on the last 2-3 years? We've come from almost like a hysteria. I don't know how you would describe it right now, but we definitely have, I would say, not seen some of the impacts like we thought we were going to have. What's happened here?
So we started off with what we call tar spot tunnel vision. Everybody really focused on tar spot, thought tar spot was going to be the thing that was just going to destroy their crop. What we've learned is tar spot is so environmentally affected. It is, when you think about tar spot, it is more important in 2024 what the weather you're going to have versus whether or not you had tar spot in 2023. It is very, very, very strongly affected by the environmental conditions. So in a lot of areas we saw early signs of tar spot. The weather said we were going to have tar spot, but the conditions changed just enough that it did not rear its ugly head.
Yeah, and same thing in southwestern Ontario, right, Marika?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had wet weather everywhere, so we had the conditions, we had heavy dews. Like every morning, I would say that corn had the conditions for tar spot to infect, but it really seemed to just come in along the lakes. And further north, we had it, but it came in so late that the impact to yield was probably negligible. So, yeah, same with Phil. It's a disease that we can manage. We don't have to be tunnel visioned on just that. There's a lot of reasons, like Phil mentioned, about plant health, that doing a fungicide on our corn pays every year, not just the years where tar spot might blow up.
Okay, so how do we be proactive with a fungicide when we're so dependent on what Mother Nature throws our way when it comes to a disease like tar spot?
We find that as we run more and more trials, do more and more trialing, we're teasing out the value of those plant health benefits of our fungicides. And it makes it a lot easier for that grower to apply that fungicide on past history and the performance that we've had, knowing that if the disease does not show up, he's still going to get that plant health benefit, which is going to protect the yield that he's setting himself up for. So you can look at a lot of different ways and a lot of different timings, especially on corn. And there's no way I'm going to come here and say for tar spot do this. And the reason I'm not going to say that is because we don't know when tar spot may show up. Tar spot can affect corn anywhere from the early vegetative stages all the way through reproductive stage. So what I reassure our customers on is that we can handle tar spot. We're going to watch the weather. We're going to watch the conditions. We're going to know if it's out there. We've got the products. We've got the knowledge to be able to help you manage it if it begins to show up in your fields.
It's a really interesting one where this is where research, I think, is really, really critical, because we come out, all of a sudden we think it's going to be a real major factor. It's going to provide tremendous coverage of acres, detrimental impact, yields not going to zero, but really, really impacted. And over time we're learning about the disease, which means our best management practices, they evolve and they change, right? So what we knew 2 years ago and what we were saying to do, they're going to be a little bit different today, and probably when we look 2 years out, there's probably going to be some changes there as well. That's why the research is really, really important, Marijke, to continue to evolve it and make sure we're on top of the best management practices.
Yeah, for sure. And we've put a lot of effort as a team in Ontario to collect side-by-sides from growers, because I think in the fungicide space, it's really important to understand the ROI, the return on investment in a grower field scale scenario. And so we have over 100 side-by-sides the last 6 years looking at fungicide on corn. And it's been really neat to see that because we've come a long way in the fungicide space and we have products that have plant health benefits now, the risk now to applying that fungicide is much lower in terms of, am I going to get an ROI or not? And then when it comes to tar spot, every year is different, like Phil said. And we know in Ontario, R1, silk timing, that is the time that you're going to get the best return on investment year in and year out. Don't farm just last year's weather. Have a longer term plan. And we know that R1 is the timing that pays the most. And if we don't have the disease, we'll have the plant health benefit impact on yield there. If we do and tar spot comes in, I know some growers, they ask, do I do a second pass? And the research has showed that, when tar spot comes in early enough, a second pass might pay. But don't go out and think you need to do all your. That's a conversation, and it's not going to be every year. It's going to be fewer years than the most.
Phil, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but let's talk about weed resistance. And the simple way to put this is this problem not going away. There is no simple solutions. And if I said to you, Phil, the weeds are winning, is that a fairly accurate description?
It is, unfortunately. Every year we see a new resistance pop up somewhere in the country to a particular mode of action. And overall, I know several years ago I made this statement as a closing remark on your show. The easiest weed to control is the one that we do not allow to come up. And that gets stronger and stronger every year as we look at how this resistance is growing. We really have to focus on multiple effective modes of action for all of the weed species out there that we're trying to control, so that those post-emergent applications, we've thinned the herd, we have less weeds out there that we have to try to control, and we can just get better coverage and a better overall job from our post-emergent applications. In my area, we are still putting another residual in with that post-emergent application. So we're putting residuals on as many as 3 times. Our early burn down, then our planting pre-emergent program, and then our post-emergent program, we're adding a residual in there as well. So 3 spray trips is getting more and more common.
Just more time with your butt in that sprayer, right? You talk to growers in Canada and the U.S., they'll tell you, I spend more time in my sprayer at this point than I do any other piece of equipment. So that cab better and that seat better be comfy. Indeed. And really, Marijke, it comes down to having that, 1, the historical records to see what you've done, but 2, the plan going forward, really strategizing what do I need to do to be as far ahead as possible of these weeds. Easier said than done, but you got to have a plan.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really neat just, working for Syngenta, but that we've been talking Foundation Acre for a long time. And it started, almost 20 years ago that in Ontario was really a strong message about keeping things clean from a yield standpoint, that we were impacting yield. Today we're talking about the same message and, Foundation Acre, we kind of rebranded that in Ontario, but for both reasons, both yield, having that plan, start with a strong foundation, but to make sure we're controlling more weeds that we cannot see, because that's the best approach from a resistance standpoint. So it's so much about resistance today, but we can't forget the reason why we do this in the first place is that ROI piece, and that is a strong message as well. So it's kind of neat. We've been there, still talking the same story today. It's not going to change years down the road, but I think we're doing overall a good job of having that plan. And the change I think now is that we've always had that plan A. Now we need to have the plan B and C in our back pockets.
Absolutely. Well, Phil, Marijke, thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got John Barlow, Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Syngenta Canada from the National Farm Machinery Show. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Today's episode of RealAg Radio is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, and you can find out more by going to syngenta.ca/products, and make sure you check out the full portfolio of Miravis products. Okay, we're going to tap into a conversation that Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture had with John Barlow. He is MP from Foothills, also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. They talked at the Northern Ontario Ag Conference that happened on Monday. And of course, Bill C-234 was very much top of mind for growers in attendance and Lindsay and John. Let's hear the conversation.
We are literally standing in a cave. It is very cool.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the more unique venues I've ever been to. I feel a little freaked out that I'm inside a cave for an agriculture conference, but yeah, it's really cool. I've heard amazing things about this science center, so it's good to see it.
So yes, we are at the Northern Ontario Ag Conference. You're here, of course, to speak today. What will you be covering in your chat?
You know, they've asked me to focus on Canada's role, agriculture, when it comes to global trade. I think that's a very important topic right now, as we see agriculture as a very important tool for us to rebuild Canada's respect globally, but also certainly rebuild our economy as we come out of what's going to be a very difficult financial time. But I think the most important message of that is there is incredible opportunities for agriculture to have an important role. But unfortunately, our current government, I think, is taking us down the wrong path for our ability to meet that potential. So I think this is a critical crossroads where a government has to make a decision. Are we going to follow that European model of activism, ideology, and not making science-based decisions, or are we going to pick the path where we're basing our decisions on innovation, science, data, and what's best for Canada and what's best for our global customers?
I'll editorialize a little. It's not working great for the EU right now. Anyway, but that's my own slide. Okay, so now, but of course, Parliament is back sitting. Bill C-234 is in the works. we're not necessarily seeing a lot of action here as far as moving it forward. How do you see this playing out moving forward?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's back in the Liberals' court for the most part. We are trying to get it on the table as often as we can. So we've been successful that way. We've had it up for 2 hours of debate already. But as long as the Liberals put up speakers, they can drag this out for as long as they want. So obviously our argument is, this passed the House of Commons with, very strong support of all the opposition parties. This has already gone through the Senate. Stop fighting what clearly parliamentarians, elected officials, and Canadian farmers want. But obviously they are not going to let this go. But we are not giving up the fight. We know this is an uphill battle. Even if we get it to a vote in the House and it passes, it goes back to the Senate. So the shenanigans could start all over again. Really frustrating, I know, for Canadian farmers who were so engaged in the push to get 234 across the line. But unfortunately, the Liberals are refusing on this one to put a carbon tax carve-out for farmers, despite the financial benefit that this would give farmers. But certainly for us to try and lower food prices for Canadians, ensure more farmers we have, more product, higher yield, cheaper prices.
Now, there's also the option potentially of accepting the amendment and moving it forward, but that's not necessarily first choice. Is that something you could see moving on and moving it forward so that you at least get something on the table, or is it all or nothing?
Yeah, I think preferably, certainly we'd rather have it in its original form without the amendments. We have had some discussions. Can we move it along if we drop the amendment on taking out heating and cooling of barns? I think we could live with the sunset clause if we had to. Obviously, our thought is we're going to be in government by that time, and we will get rid of the carbon tax entirely. But if that's what it takes, a little bit of negotiation, some compromise on our part to expedite this through the process, I think we're open to that. But certainly the feedback we've had from Canadian farmers is they want that heating and cooling of barns element as part of the bill. And really, that's half the bill, and so to eliminate that would be negating a real important aspect. But let's be honest, the only reason that amendment is in there, it has nothing to do with that there are other alternatives for heating and cooling of barns. This was a way for the Liberals and Liberal-appointed senators to delay and stall this bill. That's really all it is. They wanted an amendment. They didn't care what the amendment was. So this isn't about what's right and what's wrong. This is a way for them to just put wrenches in the wheels of this bill. And again, it's really unfortunate because this is an element where you've seen, as you know, Lindsay, it's very rare for all agriculture commodity groups to come together in a united voice, but they are on this particular issue. So for the Liberal government to ignore that for an ideological argument is really, really frustrating.
All right, John Barlow, thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. Good to chat with you.
That was Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture talking to the Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada, MP John Barlow. You could tell one thing about this week, and it is Valentine's Day. We can't squeeze any more events and discussions into a week like this. This is really one of those weeks that is jam-packed for Canadian and U.S. agriculture indeed. I want to thank Syngenta Canada for being the sponsor of today's show. It was great to connect with all the Syngenta customers that are down here in Louisville, Kentucky at the National Farm Machinery Show. Always one of the highlights of the year, getting to do so, and we're working our way just a little bit closer to planting with every passing day. And you could tell when I was talking to the growers last night, there is some eagerness in the room. Right? It feels like we just finished corn harvest, and we were right there. Lots of eagerness to. There's some challenges, but they are definitely prepared to take it on full steam ahead for sure. So tomorrow on the show, we're going to be having a Farmer Rapid Fire. Friday, you're going to hear the live broadcast, the live recording of the show from a Cargill Market Sense event in Red Deer, Alberta. So I got to catch a plane. We got to get out of here. I want to thank Syngenta Canada for being today's show sponsor. Find out more by going to syngenta.ca/products. And of course, please check out their full range of Miravis brands. So whether you're growing wheat, corn, soybeans, horticultural crops, make sure you're checking out Miravis. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Authority 480 herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 herbicide delivers outstanding control of the toughest broadleaf weeds in wheat, pulse crops, flax, mustard, and more. See your local retailer today for more information.